A study in the process of individuation. During the 1920s, I made acquaintance in America of a lady with an academic education. We will call her Mrs. X, who had studied psychology for 9 years. She had read all the more recent literature in the field. In 1928, at the age of 55, she came to Europe in order to continue her studies under my guidance. As the daughter of an exceptional father, she had varied interests, was extremely cultured, and possessed a lively turn of mind. She was unmarried, but lived with the unconscious equivalent of a human partner, namely the animus. A situation that often occurs with academic women. As frequently happens, this was based on a positive father complex. She was daddy's little angel, but consequently did not have a good relationship to her mother. Now, her animus was not the kind to give her cranky ideas. She was protected from this by her natural intelligence, by a remarkable readiness to tolerate the opinions of other people. This good quality, by no means to be expected in the presence of an animus, had, in conjunction with some difficult experiences, enabled her to realize that she had gotten stuck. This was one of her reasons for her trip to Europe. Associated with this, there was another, not accidental motive. On her mother's side, she was of Scandinavian descent. Since her relation to her mother left very much to be desired, as she herself certainly realized, the feeling had gradually grown on her that this side of her nature might have developed differently, if only the relation to her mother had given it a chance. Before coming to Switzerland, she had gone back to Denmark, her mother's country. There, the thing that affected her the most was the landscape. And, strangely, she was overcome by the desire to paint. You see, she didn't know how to paint or draw. But she tried her hand at watercolors. And her modest landscapes filled her with a strange feeling of contentment. Painting them, she told me, seemed to fill her with new life. Arriving in Zurich, she continued her painting efforts, and on the day before she came to me for the first time, she began another landscape, this time from memory. While she was working on it, a fantasy image suddenly thrust itself between her and the picture. She saw herself with the lower half of her body in the earth, stuck fast in a block of rock. She felt caught and helpless. She then suddenly saw me in the guise of a medieval sorcerer. She shouted for help, and I came along and touched the rock with my magic wand. The stone instantly burst open, and she stepped out uninjured. She then painted this fantasy image instead of the landscape and brought it to me on the following day. As usually happens with beginners and people with no skill of hand, the drawing of the picture caused her considerable difficulties. In such cases, it is very easy for the unconscious to slip its subliminal images into the painting. This picture shows, first of all, her imprisoned state, but not yet the act of liberation. Miss X had discovered all by herself the method of active imagination that I have been long accustomed to. And I was able to approach the problem at just the point indicated by the picture. She is caught in the unconscious and expects magical help from me as a sorcerer. She did not want to know how liberation might be possible in a general way, but how it would come about for her. And about this I knew as little as she. So I counseled her to content herself with what was possible and to use her fantasy for the purpose of circumventing technical difficulties. I also advised her not to shy away from bright colours, for I knew from experience that vivid colours seem to attract the unconscious. Thereupon, a new picture arose. While Miss X was painting this picture, she made all sorts of discoveries. Above all, she had no notion of what picture she was going to paint. She tried to reimagine the initial situation, the rocky shore and the sea, but the eggs turned into abstract spheres or circles, and the magician's touch became a flash of lightning cutting through her unconscious state. I didn't tell her this. I didn't want to interrupt. I didn't want to impose my knowledge on a natural process. But she had touched into the ancient conception of the philosopher's egg, the alchemical philosopher's stone. Now, the form of this picture did not go down well with the patient's conscious mind. Luckily, however, while painting it, Miss X had discovered that two factors were involved. These, in her own words, were reason and the eyes. Reason always wanted to make the picture as it thought it ought to be, but the eyes held fast to their vision, their inner fantasy, and finally forced the picture to come out as it actually did, and not in accordance with rationalistic expectations. Her reason, she said, had really intended a daylight scene, with the sunshine melting the sphere free, but the eyes favoured a nocturne with shattering, dangerous lightning. This realization helped her to acknowledge the actual results of her artistic efforts, and to admit that it was in fact an objective and impersonal process, and not a personal relationship. Her interpretation of the lightning was, much to my agreement, a flash of intuition. This was brilliantly archetypal. Like lightning coming from a thunderstorm, intuition comes from somewhere outside the ego. Like Yahweh, like Zeus, the spirit of thunder, they strike the ego with lightning, breaking it like an eggshell. They strike and animate the sleeping, greater version of yourself who is trapped in stone, the more complete personality. This is the self. This self was always present, but sleeping, like Nietzsche's image in the stone. It is the philosopher's stone, and what sleeps in it is the spirit of Mercury, the original man, the great being within. Michelangelo may have experienced this when he was crafting the statue of David. He frantically worked in secret, and when asked afterwards, said that he saw an angel trapped inside the block of stone, and it became of primary importance that he frees it. Now, I did not tell our patient any of this. In truth, I did not really know any of this. You see, her third picture is what inspired me to make a serious study of alchemy. While Miss X was painting this picture, she felt that two earlier dreams were mingling with her vision. They were the two big dreams of her life. The first was of the world, which always appeared as a globe getting divided into combinations of 12. The second, she saw a golden snake in the sky demanding sacrifice from among a great crowd of people. The man who obeyed this command stood up from the crowd with an expression of sorrow. Now, it has to be emphasized, this patient felt that the painting of this picture was the climax of her life. I began to understand that this sphere was the taking off of the self. The following pictures began to take the forms of mandalas as her deeper unconscious expressed itself onto these ordered circles. The The ritual of drawing mandalas is extremely common in Eastern religions. It forms as a focal point to concentrate the mind. One of the most incredible versions of this is where Buddhist monks drop one grain of sand at a time to create huge and elaborate mandalas of almost glorious perfection. Yet the second they are finished, they are told to completely destroy it by blowing it all away.